Welcome to Whispers of History, where the past tiptoes through your mind, quiet and unhurried. Tonight's story is slow, strange, and maybe just silly enough to make your eyelids heavier than a toga after dinner. As if you're new here, press that little subscribe button like you're sealing an ancient scroll. It helps keep these stories alive. And leave a comment with your location and local time. It's oddly comforting to know who else is dozing off with you across the world. Now let's ease into tonight's journey gently, like a Roman reclining on a very ambitious couch. You wake up to the soft, dusty light of a Roman morning. Not the Rome of emperors and gladiators. That's too noisy for tonight. No, this is the Rome of humming clay pots and men who whisper to kilns. The villa smells like warm and slightly overripe olives. You are, for some reason, barefoot, and the tiles under your feet are cool and cracked in all the charming ways time allows. Somewhere in the next room, someone sneezes like a senator trying not to look weak. You walk through a narrow corridor, its walls decorated with faded frescoes of dolphins doing suspiciously human things. Outside, a man in a tunic is crouching over a vase, not smashing it, not painting it, listening to it intently, as if the vase has opinions. His name is, and he believes his latest invention, a singing vase, will change everything. It's not magic, he assures you, even though it kind of is. The vase hums when wind passes through its handles due to carefully sculpted channels inside the clay. He calls it Vase. The locals call it that weird pot that makes the noise when no one's home. Thinks it could be used to communicate across gardens or maybe spook thieves. You nod politely, as one does when faced with someone who has clearly not slept since the last Saturnalia. Historical records confirm the Romans were deeply into acoustics. Amphitheaters, pipes, fountains, even whispering galleries. Was likely not alone in his sonic pursuits. But historians still debate whether Vase actually existed or if just misheard a bee and got ideas. Meanwhile, across the courtyard, a goat sneezes in perfect harmony with the vase. Nearly weeps with joy. You make a mental note never to mock artists or goats. You walk away slowly past fig trees and small clay statuettes of household gods who seem mildly annoyed but not enough to do anything. The wind changes direction. The vase sings again, this time lower, like it's thinking. On Section 2, the Alley of Clay and Echoes. The street outside the villa is paved with stones that remember too many footsteps. Each one is a little uneven, like Rome herself trying not to trip over her own grandeur. You pass a bakery where someone is inventing burnt bread for the first time. The scent is oddly comforting, like childhood and poor time management. The baker waves, arm dusted in flour, eyes hollow from waking up before Jupiter himself. Catches up with you, still holding his vase like a child dragging a favorite toy through the market. It sang in F major, he announces. You nod, as if that means anything to a world still arguing whether 0 is a number. He leads you to a workshop where half-mad men make pottery sing, squeak, and sometimes sigh. It's called the Alley of Echoes. No map will show it to you, but every Roman has passed it at least once in a dream. Is inside a cramped stall an old woman who claims to be 90 but looks 200 sells whistles shaped like birds. She says the birds talk back to her at night, not metaphorically. Literally, you buy one just in case. One potter is designing amphorae to store not just wine but voices. Another has built a water jug that mimics thunder if tipped too suddenly. Whether these are inventions or hallucinations is unclear, and honestly no one minds. You notice a curious sign above the archway: vases break, echoes don't. Historians have found fragments of curious pottery near ancient Rome, with internal fluting and holes designed for airflow. No one agrees what they were for. Some say ventilation, others suggest music, and one bold paper claims they were wine coolers for very pretentious parties. As a child walks by, blows into one of the bird whistles, and it accidentally harmonizes with Vase. The entire alley falls quiet for a beat too long. Then applause, light and polite. You sit on a step, letting the breeze roll over your face. It carries whispers, sighs, the faint sound of someone trying to tune a jug. You feel yourself soften into the scenery. Rome is louder than it looks, but only if you know where to listen. You follow deeper into the alley until the buildings start leaning in like gossiping old senators. The stones here are darker, not from age but from soot, evidence of small, ambitious fires that never made it into the history books. Above you, laundry flaps between windows like white flags surrendering to the day's laziness. Somewhere, a lyre twangs off-key and then gives up. Stops at a humble shop with no sign, just a vase suspended by a rope that spins slowly in the breeze. Its motion makes a soft wheezing sound, as though the air is tired from all the artistry. Inside, the light is dim, filtered through stained cloth and floating dust. A young man, his face smudged with what you hope is clay, nods at you without looking up from his work. He is carving spiral grooves inside a shallow bowl. To trap voices, he says. You glance at, he whispers, it's a funerary bowl. When placed near the deceased, the family believed it could absorb the last whispers of the soul. You look again at the bowl, now seeming far more intimate than decorative. This belief wasn't isolated. Several Roman tombs included items historians call vase voice vessels. Their exact purpose is unknown. Maybe they were simply symbolic, or maybe, as some scholars tentatively propose, they served as primitive memory jars. One paper dares to speculate they were meant to catch the wind of grief. You walk slowly through the rows of shelves, passing bottles shaped like lungs, flasks etched with sound waves, and a jar with a lid designed to vibrate when you speak near it. A whispery active jar, probably not great for secrets. An older woman stands in the corner, arranging broken vases by pitch rather than shape. When one hums in sympathy with another, she places them side by side like lovers in a bathhouse. She lets you hold a vase rumored to have been carried across the Alps. It's lopsided with a dent that makes it wheeze like a tired ox. But in the right light, the glaze glimmers with embedded flakes of volcanic ash. "Oh, Pompeii," she says softly, "some vases are silent because they heard too much." You place it back slowly. The room feels quieter than before. Later, as the sun lowers into its theatrical amber mood, insists on one last stop. "We must take the vase to the forum," he says, gripping it like it's a newborn or a particularly sensitive pigeon. You weave through the winding streets until you arrive at the Forum, Rome's social epicenter, where everyone from fishmongers to philosophers cross paths, argue about taxes, and pretend not to see people they owe money to. At this hour, it's less crowded. Market stalls have been stripped clean, and the leftover smell is part fruit, part fish, and part desperation. Sets the vase on a stone pedestal and waits. You wait too, though you're not entirely sure for what. Then the breeze picks up, the vase hums. It's a low note, mournful but clear, heads turn. A few people pause mid-argument to listen. That's the sound of commerce, mutters, or indigestion still testing. A street performer with a lute sidles over and begins to play, tentatively at first, then matching the pitch of the vase. You watch as man and clay instrument form a duet older than either of them understands. Nearby, a man selling boiled chickpeas joins in by accident. His ladle clanks in rhythm. Beams utterly vindicated. "It works in crowds," he whispers, eyes wide with triumph. Historical records of the Roman Forum mention strange performers, wind-based instruments, and vessels that seemed to moan when the air shifted. Some chalk it up to superstition. Others, especially modern acoustic archaeologists, consider it possible early experimentation with sonic environments. Still, no scholarly consensus has been reached, though one theory jokingly called it the first public podcast. A child throws a pebble into the vase. It clinks embarrassingly, the spell breaks, people laugh. The chickpea vendor yells at the child's mother. The lute player sighs and tunes a string back into defiance. You sit on a step and watch Rome return to itself. Pigeons strut with delusions of grandeur. Someone drops a basket of figs with the comedic timing of a playwright. Turns to you and says, "They laughed, that means they listened." And you realize he's right. The vase may not have changed the world, but for one wind-charmed moment it held it still. You wake not from sleep, but from that peculiar day's Rome casts just after sundown, where shadows soften and everything smells like old bread and slightly singed oil lamps, is already moving, clutching his singing vase and humming what might be a hymn or might be indigestion again. He gestures for you to follow. Tonight, he says, he'll show you where the real work. Above ground, he grumbles, you get applause and fig peels. But under Rome is where the sounds are born. You descend beneath the city, past arches that wheeze like retirees and stone steps that argue under your weight. The air shifts from warm and citrusy to cold and mineral, tinged with something oddly metallic. You find yourself in a vaulted cellar lit only by flickering oil flames in glass jars. The walls are lined with shelves of broken pottery. Not art, not heirlooms, just vases that didn't sing quite right. Failures, whispers reverently, or misinterpretations of success. As a man with soot-smudged cheeks and an apron stitched from linen scraps approaches. You've brought the, he says, eyes wide with that particular gleam known only to inventors and professional gamblers. The man introduces himself as a who claims he once built a pot that could mimic a dog bark well enough to guard a house. It worked too well, he says, scared off a tax collector and the wife. He leads you through rows of strange instruments. Amphorae with reeds poking from their spouts, bowls filled with sand that pulse when someone speaks, a jug that hums until you stare directly at it, then goes silent. A Roman shyness detector, perhaps. In the far corner, a massive vat gurgles softly. Explains, it captures echoes. I pour water in it when someone dies. The sound gets sealed in. Historians have recorded references to echo jars in some cryptic Roman poems. One line famously reads, I kept his voice in a jar and now it cries at dawn. Scholarly translations vary. Some think it's literal. Others claim it was metaphor for memory or hangovers. No one is sure. You lean close to one such jar and swear you hear a sigh, or maybe just your own breath doubled back. Touches your arm, nods solemnly, and you both step away like you've accidentally interrupted a prayer. Though the cellar is quiet now, save for the whisper of flames and the soft sob of pottery too proud to break. The next day, you find yourself walking a quieter street near the hill, your legs somehow remembering how to carry you through another Rome morning. There's a small temple here, dedicated not to Jupiter or Mars, but to some nearly forgotten deity named. Claims was the goddess of soft warnings and faint murmurs, protector of things not quite said. She was the patron of whisperers and eavesdroppers, he says, a little too cheerfully. The temple is modest, tucked between two bakeries and a bathhouse where the steam leaks into the alley like gossip. Ivy trails down its front and the columns are slightly crooked, like they've been listening too hard for too long. Inside, it's blissfully still. A basin of water sits in the center, ringed by smooth singing stones that make no sound at all unless you run a wet finger around their edges. When you do, they hum in harmony with the draft sneaking through the doorway. As a priestess not quite old but definitely tired of being surprised by anything approaches with a nod. You seek's echo, she says, offering you a tiny scroll. You unroll it, it's blank. Oh, it only speaks when folded, she says, as if that explains anything. You fold it once, still blank, twice. Something appears, a single dot, the priestess nods again. That is your echo today. You thank her, unsure what else to do with your spiritual punctuation mark. She leads you to a wall covered in clay plaques, each inscribed with someone's whispered wish. You press your ear to one, you hear a laugh, not loud, just gentle. like someone remembering something embarrassing and smiling about it 20 years too late. Historical records of minor Roman gods and cults often include mysterious figures like whose names appear in graffiti and temple donations, but almost nowhere else. Some scholars argue they were regional folk deities absorbed into urban worship. Others believe they were made up entirely by scribes trying to fill space in tax records. Leaves a small offering, a sliver of bronze shaped like an ear. For better hearing, he whispers. As you leave, a gust of wind pushes the temple door open just enough to make a vase on a nearby ledge sing. You both turn. It's not one of it's older. Though the priestess only smiles and says, Rome remembers even the things we forget. As outside, the city hums as it always does, quietly beneath the clatter. And you begin to wonder just how much of Rome's history lives in the spaces no one's listening to. The next morning begins, as Rome often does, with pigeons having a loud disagreement outside your window. Is already outside, fiddling with some clay contraption that looks suspiciously like a funnel wearing a hat. You don't ask. You've learned not to. Today, he wants to take you to the aqueducts, not the flashy ones with arches tourists would one day romanticize, but the service tunnels beneath them. Water carries sound, he says, balancing the vase on his head like a baker with questionable priorities. And where there's sound, there's memory. You follow him out of the city's heart, past sun-bleached walls and fig sellers who offer you samples that taste like secrets kept too long. Soon, the ground gets rougher, the air cooler. You find yourself under one of the smaller aqueducts where dripping moss and mineral veins glint like silver threads. The tunnel is narrow and echo-rich. Each footstep, each breath folds back on itself. It feels like walking through your own thoughts, louder than expected and slightly judgmental. Places the vase near a trickle of water. Now we listen, he says, as though that's a reasonable activity for grown adults in a damp tunnel. And then there it is, a tone, faint but unmistakable. The water running past the vase's carved openings creates a resonance. Not a note really, more like a sigh that's learned to sing. You both freeze, unsure if you've heard it or dreamed it. A rat scampers past, unimpressed. Leans in, mouth open like he's waiting for the vase to tell him a bedtime story. You sit on a stone ledge, damp and ancient. Nearby, carved into the wall, is a message. She told me yes, then drowned my name. Beneath it, a date, 41 AD, no author, just the confession preserved in moss and time. Historians have long noted inscriptions in aqueduct tunnels. Some are maintenance notes, others crude jokes. But a few are different, too poetic to be graffiti, too intimate to be official. No one agrees on their purpose. Were they hidden poems, secret prayers? Historians still debate whether they were expressions of grief, madness, or art no one was meant to see. The vase sings again, this time slightly higher. You and look at each other, sharing the ridiculous and wonderful knowledge that you're eavesdropping on water. And then somewhere above you, a drop lands on stone with such precise rhythm, that you wonder if the city itself is trying to keep time. By midday, the city is wide awake and shouting about it. Rome at noon is a place of roasted barley and unspoken competition. Who can yell louder, sell faster, sweat less? Leads you to a tucked-away corner of the district, which smells like boiled cabbage and ambition. Here is a market you won't find on any respectable map. It's called the Market of Murmurs. Legend says it formed when a merchant caught a whisper and tried to sell it. No one believed him, but everyone listened. The stalls don't look special, just clay jars, flutes, and odd instruments strung like fish from tent poles. But the merchants insist their items contain voices. One vendor lets you try on a necklace made of hollow ceramic beads. When worn, it emits a soft hum, supposedly tuned to the last thing your mother ever said to you. Unless your mother was quiet, the vendor adds, in which case it's just decorative. Negotiates fiercely for a jar labeled Laugh of a Drunk Senator. He ends up trading one of his singing vases and a pair of sandals with uneven straps. The merchant shakes the jar. It giggles, or maybe wheezes. Who's to say? A boy offers to sell you a pebble that once sat inside Cicero's shoe. It remembers every insult he ever muttered. You politely decline. There's a booth called Echo Restoration, where an old man claims he can repair broken memories. He takes your coin, hums near your shoulder, and says, "There, that fight from last winter gone fuzzy now." You're not sure if you should be grateful or report him. Historical documents speak vaguely of black markets in the less for smuggled goods and more for forbidden ideas. Some scholars dismiss them as literary invention. Others have found coded references in merchant records to items like echo bottles, argued flasks, and even unspoken oaths in corked clay. You walk past a booth offering unheard apologies for a price too steep. Another stall sells silence in little velvet bags. You touch one, it's warm, that seems unfair. He walks beside you, his new giggling jar in tow, beaming like a boy with the world's most haunted toy. We're not mad, he says. We're sound archaeologists. You nod because, frankly, at this point, you'd believe the air has memories too. It's above you, a wind stirs the market's awnings. For a moment, every chime, jar, and hollow whistle sings in chaotic harmonic dissonance, like Rome exhaling all at once. You stop and listen. And for the first time all day, the city seems to be listening back. As evening creeps in like a cat who once ruled Egypt but now just wants scraps. The air turns gold, then copper, then something resembling burnt wine, sweet, sticky, and a little regretful. Leads you uphill, past a crumbling archway where ivy and apathy are locked in an ancient wrestling match. You arrive at a modest brick building with no windows and a crooked wooden sign. Penumbra, the Archive of Shadows. Inside, it's cold and smells like ink that's run out of ambition. Shelves lean under the weight of scrolls too fragile to be read and boxes too mysterious to open without divine permission. At the center is a vast wall of clay tiles, hundreds of them, each etched with what looks like nonsense. This is where Rome keeps her unsolved songs, says. Every note that never found its rhythm, every phrase whispered to no one, they come here. So you raise an eyebrow, they come here. How he shrugs, or they're brought, same thing really. The librarian, an older woman with eyes like fogged glass, nods in your direction and offers you a brush. Not to clean, but to listen. You watch as brushes dust gently from one tile. A low tone vibrates up his arm, he closes his eyes. This one, he says softly, is the sound of an apology that arrived a day too late. You brush your own tile, it's warm to the touch. It hums barely, the echo of a half-finished sentence. It tickles your ear like someone trying to remember your name but giving up halfway. Historians have discovered similar clay tiles across Rome, etched not with words but wave-like patterns. Most dismiss them as decorative. A few acoustic theorists believe they may have recorded sound in the sense that grooves can carry vibration. Scholars still debate whether these were accidental artifacts or deliberate preservation. Though the librarian offers tea that tastes like regret, she hands you a blank tile and asks, "Do you want to leave something unsaid?" You hesitate, then press your thumb to the surface. A soft vibration lingers, as if the clay is now in on a secret it won't share. Whispers, this is the part of Rome where silence becomes legacy. You both sit on a bench worn by every kind of waiting. Letters unsent, lovers not returned, ideas not yet ripe. The room feels fuller than when you entered. And you wonder, how much of history is just a collection of things people almost said? Night falls definitively, with the kind of authority Rome respects. You're back in the city proper now, where torches flicker along stone alleys and laughter bounces off the walls like coins in a wishing fountain. Has received an invitation to a private gathering. It's not a party, he insists. It's a symposium with snacks. You arrive at a small courtyard nestled behind a collapsed theater. The gate creaks open to reveal oil lamps strung between olive trees, cushions scattered across mosaics, and a fountain bubbling like it's gossiping with itself. Around the cushions sit philosophers, potters, failed orators, musicians with missing instruments, and one woman holding what appears to be a jar full of screams. For emergencies, she says with a polite smile. At the center of the gathering is a clay amphora so large it might have housed a modest family of hedgehogs. It's pierced with holes and mounted on a rotating base. One of the hosts turns it slowly, and as air flows through the holes, the amphora emits a rich, polyphonic hum. "Our beams has begun." On platters arrive cheese, figs, grilled dates, and little pastry puffs filled with honey and audible joy. As you eat, the vase sings. Each course has a note. Each sip of wine adds a vibration. Then the guests begin their ritual, sharing a sound. Not a word, not a speech, just a sound they've carried too long. One man clicks his tongue like his grandmother used to. A woman hums the first 4 notes of a lullaby no one finishes. A boy plays the side of his wine cup like a drum. You realize This is a banquet of memory. Ta taps his vase and it answers not in pitch but in rhythm. It knows his hand. Historical records describe Roman banquets filled with performance, debate, and structured noise. But this sort of auditory communion has no surviving documentation. 1 century mosaic depicts guests holding their ears with joy. Some think it was a joke, others aren't sure anymore. You're offered a chance to share. You clear your throat. Then quietly you whistle a tune your grandfather once used to call you in from the gardens. Though the amphora hums back matching your pitch, not exactly, but close enough to make your chest ache. Though the guests applaud gently, no one asks what it meant, they understand that's the whole point. As the night deepens, the air fills with ancient sounds, some silly, some sacred. It becomes hard to tell where Rome ends and memory begins. You lean back on the cushions, full in every way. The vase hums softly beside you, is already asleep, snoring through his nose in the key of contentment. And above you a star winks, like it too is remembering a tune no one else can hear. The next morning arrives not with sunlight but with sound, low and rolling like a lazy drum echoing across the city's ribs. It's not thunder, it's something older, something wooden. Wakes with a start, muttering about vowels and dreams of underwater amphory. You're still lying on a cushion in the courtyard but the guests have vanished. All that remains is a smear of honey, a half-full wine jug, and a soft hum from the central vase that hasn't stopped singing since you fell asleep. He insists you follow him again. Of course, and you do, because Rome, in all its madness and mystery, is starting to feel like a dream you don't want to wake from. This time he leads you to the ponds, an old stone bridge the Tiber's mist tries to erase every morning. But instead of crossing it, leads you underneath, into the bowels of the arches, where water laps against mossy stone and pigeons hold secret meetings. Though the echo here is different, thicker, not louder, just heavier, like it's been here longer than anything else. Beneath the bridge is a wooden contraption, half sunken, lashed together with rope and stubbornness. The breath bridge says with pride. It sings only when the wind flows just right. And as if cued by the drama, a gust cuts through the arches. The wooden tubes, carefully placed between the stones, begin to moan, a long, hollow sound that quivers like a memory trying to hold still. Each arch holds a different note. Together they form a scale. The bridge becomes a lung. Romans built bridges to carry more than feet, says, placing a hand on the stone. They carried voices, intentions, regrets. The Tiber remembers. Some modern scholars mention strange tonal constructions near Roman bridges, pipes embedded in arches, strange grooves in stone. Most call them drainage features. But a fringe theory suggests certain bridges were intentionally designed to resonate. The ponds, in particular, is suspected to have once sung with wind, a theory largely ignored due to lack of evidence and, frankly, patience. Picks up a hollow reed and hands it to you. Play, he says, as though that's something you know how to do. You blow uncertainly. The bridge responds with a disapproving groan, tries. His note earns a deep, almost amused rumble. You stay there, under the stone giant's belly, trading sounds until the sun starts to climb and the pigeons grow bored. You can't help but wonder, how many Romans heard these notes centuries ago and thought the gods were murmuring just for them? You leave the bridge lighter than you arrived, as though some forgotten weight has been sung right off your shoulders. And in the afternoon haze, with clay dust still in your hair and the faint song of the bridge lingering in your ears, insists there's one last place. You'll like this one, he says. It's full of mistakes. That's how you end up in the library of the unwritten score. A name spoken only among Rome's more peculiar artisans and all of its smarter stray cats. From the outside, the building looks like it gave up halfway through being a temple. Its columns are uneven, its door is too small, and the sign above reads, "The writing sounds." Inside, the walls are packed with scrolls and wax tablets, yes, but not with poems or laws. These are filled with notations, squiggles, arrows, dots, spirals, some on music, many not. It's a museum of attempts. Each scroll is labeled not with a title but a shrug, sound for wind during sadness, noise when a cat dies, tone to make a friend stay, and one particularly worn scroll, silence after a lie. A short man with ink-stained fingers and a toga that's seen better decades greets you. Welcome, he says, to the place where no one finishes anything. You and wander the aisles. Some scrolls are scratched out so violently the papyrus fibers fray. Others are written so faintly you have to squint through them like a bad memory. One tablet describes how to carve a flute that plays only when you cry into it. Another outlines a bell that chimes only when two people stop speaking at the same time. The footnote reads, "Tested twice. Very awkward." There's an entire section dedicated to instruments that imitate animals. Frogs, owls, donkeys. You try one carved from olive wood. It wheezes like a mule who's just learned taxes exist. Historians rarely mention this kind of work. Experimental sound, accidental music. But some rare archives do note that Roman philosophers occasionally debated whether emotions had sound. Whether guilt, for example, was a tone or just a feeling without a key. You find a scroll with nothing but one note, over and over, like someone trying to remember some things they never fully knew. The line's close and whispers, "This is where I got the idea for the vase." You both sit at a desk that's slightly tilted, probably because the floor gave up. He pulls out his own wax tablet and begins sketching another design, a flute jar hybrid. "For regrets," he says. You blow into it and it gives you back only what you wish you said. You ask him if that's possible. He shrugs, only one way to find out. And as the shadows lengthen and the walls creak like they're sighing in their sleep, you realize something quietly miraculous. You've wandered a city that remembers the things most cities forget. The mutters, the murmurs, the notes that never quite found their place. And in Rome, even the unfinished is eternal. You wake to the sound of someone playing music into a jar. Not exactly into, more like toward the jar, with the devotion of someone serenading a ghost. Is at it again. This time he's outside your room, crouched in the early morning light like a raccoon with a doctorate. His latest creation is a vase with two openings, one shaped vaguely like a mouth, the other more like an ear. He insists it's meant for conversations with the departed. You don't ask questions. You've passed the point of skepticism and arrived comfortably at acceptance. So today, he says, you'll visit the necropolis of sound. You blink as the what? He nods as though this is a reasonable sentence. The wind there remembers everyone. So, with the same dignity you once reserved for respectable appointments, you follow a man carrying a humming jar to a graveyard for noises. You arrive just beyond the edge of Rome, where the marble shrines give way to more modest tombs. Stacked urns, crumbling arches, mausoleums with doors that barely keep out the wind. It's quiet but not silent. The kind of quiet that swells around your ears, full of old whispers and heavy stone. Leads you to a low alcove where burial urns were once placed. Above them are small holes carved into the rock, ventilation, they said, but he believes otherwise. These are breath holes, he says softly, placing the singing vase just beneath one, for the last words that never came out. He taps the vase gently, and the wind answers. You hear it. A low waver, a tone so fragile it almost breaks. Sometimes, says, the air keeps grieving long after we stop. Historical accounts confirm the Romans practiced a ritual calling of the deceased's name at funerals. It was loud, ceremonial. But in some tombs, archaeologists have discovered mysterious narrow tubes, too thin for ashes, too narrow for offerings. One theory proposes they were intended to let the soul breathe, or to let mourners whisper things they didn't say in time. No consensus, just questions echoing through stone. As you walk past the graves, you hear a faint ringing, wind slipping through an old funerary urn with a cracked lid. The tone is high and thin, like a cry that forgot why it started. A hums in harmony matching the note. He doesn't explain, he never does. You sit beside him in the shade of someone's long-forgotten sorrow and let the wind touch your face. It smells of wet limestone, time, and time itself. And in that stillness, you begin to understand. Not everything that dies goes quiet. Later that evening, the city buzzes again. Not loudly. Just in that subtle Roman way, vendors arguing over grapes, children chasing after the day's last sunbeam, a donkey braying like it's had enough philosophy for one lifetime. Is unusually quiet, walking with the reverence of someone approaching a temple or a very delicate joke. You arrive at a modest courtyard workshop owned by a man named the Sculptor of Silence. He's bald in that ancient Roman way that suggests wisdom, mild annoyance, and probably a tragic backstory. His hands are dusted with marble and the kind of precision that usually gets things broken. does not carve busts, gods, or victories. He carves pauses. That's how he explains it. I sculpt silence, he says, showing you a square of marble with nothing on it. This one is a quiet after bad news. Claps lightly, brilliant, isn't it? You smile in the polite way one does when visiting a particularly creative relative. Shows you more. A curved slab representing the silence between two friends after a shared dream. A jagged pillar titled After You Confess, but before they answer. A smooth disc simply called Her Last Breath. Though they're abstract, ambiguous, and yet each one does something to you. A quiet pressure behind your ribs, a memory you didn't expect to recall. Historians rarely mention sculptors like he appears in one obscure tax record as artist of interrupted sound. Some believe he was an eccentric marble worker who couldn't get commissions. Others argue he was a philosopher who believed sound was less important than its absence. No one really knows. Rome is full of men who tried to give form to the invisible. Lets you touch one of the sculptures, cool, polished. It feels like touching a moment you weren't present for but somehow still remember. And as the sun sets, he places a small block of travertine in your hands and says, "This is yours." While you look down, it's unmarked. He smiles faintly. That one holds the silence of everything you never said today. You carry it with you not because you believe it, but because somehow you do. Outside adds it gently to your bag, as though it might break from being misunderstood. And in the distance, somewhere behind a closed shutter, a vase sings softly into the night. Rome never sleeps, as it only lowers its volumes. The next morning begins as all the best ones do, with soft rain falling on tiles and the distant clatter of someone somewhere dropping a crate of something important and pretending it didn't happen. Appears, his hair slightly damp, holding a wax tablet with rain droplets collecting in its grooves. Today, he says with a theatrical bow, we visit the only man in Rome who has never spoken a word. You wonder briefly if that includes today. It doesn't. The man in question is a philosopher, recluse, and lifelong listener. He lives at the edge of the hill in a stone house that faces nothing. No forum, no fountain, not even a decent bakery, just sky. And when it rains, listens. He welcomes you with a nod, no words, and a cup of rainwater he's been collecting since last Tuesday. It tastes like clouds that gave up. His home is filled with bowls, some clay, some bronze, some glass, all catching droplets from the eaves and open beams in his roof. Each one sings a different note as rain strikes it, a slow, deliberate song composed by clouds and gravity. While whispers, he believes the rain repeats what we forget. You sit quietly watching move from bowl to bowl, tilting one here, adjusting a string there. It's a composition, a memory made musical. He gestures for you to close your eyes. All you do. And suddenly you're surrounded by tones, soft pinging, low bloops, occasional splashes. A watery orchestra for one. It feels like someone else's childhood memory. He taps a small silver bowl. It rings in perfect pitch. He holds up a tablet with one line, "This is the sound my mother made when she waited for my father." You exhaled too loudly. He doesn't flinch, just nods. Historical accounts do mention barely. One letter from a Roman poet refers to him as that man of silence and bowls. Some dismissed him as eccentric. Others, called him a genius of quiet. Some scholars still debate whether was truly mute or simply had nothing left to add. You spend an hour just listening, then hands you a bowl. Its unassuming, dull clay chipped rim. But he places it beneath a lake in the roof with the same care you used to place a crown. When a drop falls in, it makes a hollow, satisfying thud. He smiles. You smile back, feeling oddly proud of your contribution. The rain softens, the music slows. And you realize that in this house, sound is not just heard, it's remembered. Later that afternoon insists on one final detour. Just one more street, he says. It won't sing to you, but it wants to. You follow him through Rome's older district, where the stones are more stubborn and the vines more entitled. Eventually, you arrive at a narrow alley called the Street of Completion. Except nothing here is complete. The windows are half-built, doorways stop mid-arch. Even the mosaic tiles beneath your feet shift halfway through a pattern and just stop. It's like a dream someone woke from too early. The builders died before finishing, says. Then the songwriters moved in. And indeed, from behind each crooked doorway you hear it, melodies. Hummed, strummed, whistled, never loud, never resolved. A woman sits near a doorway playing a lyre missing its final string. Her song rises and rises, then ends just before it lands. She doesn't seem frustrated, just accustomed. Another man is rehearsing a choral piece with 3 children. They sing the same 4 lines over and over, like a prayer lost on loop. That tells you this place is home to Rome's unfinished songs. Composers who gave up, musicians who lost their muses, lyrics that never rhymed. One of the doors has a plaque that reads, "Here lived. She wrote only the first lines of lullabies." You try one of the doorways. Inside is a small room filled with scrolls, each holding the beginning of a melody and then a long blank space. The first few notes are full of promise. The rest is just waiting. Historians dismiss as apocryphal, likely a poetic invention, perhaps based on an abandoned building project or a misunderstood guild hall. But even in skeptical circles, a few cryptic notes have surfaced in music treatises from the era. "Seek the street that sings half-truths," one says. "Where no song ends, no silence begins." You sit on a worn stone and hum the first line of something you don't remember learning. A young boy nearby hears you and picks up the next note. Joins in, then silence. No one pushes it further. The melody remains incomplete. But somehow that's enough. And as the sun begins to set, casting golden stripes between crooked walls and vines that refuse to grow in straight lines, you understand. Now there are places where Rome keeps her full symphonies. And then there are places like this, where she leaves room for yours. Though the next morning meets you at the city gates with wild eyes and dust in his eyebrows. We must go early, he insists, before the air gets too modern. He's carrying a bundle wrapped in faded linen. Inside, a whistle shaped like a snail, a drum no larger than a grape, and what appears to be a lyre carved from fig wood and terrible decisions. Today, you're going to the vault of forgotten instruments. It lies beneath an abandoned bathhouse, no longer steamy, no longer full of gossip or bare philosophical posturing. Now it's just a facade for a collection Rome doesn't talk about. Knocks 3 times on a rusted grating, says something in terrible Etruscan, and the door creaks open. You're hit by cool air and the faint metallic scent of memory. Inside, the vault stretches long and low, lined with alcoves and niches stuffed with relics. Bells made for birds, pipes bent into spirals, stringed instruments meant to be plucked underwater. A harp for storms. A flute for bees. One sign reads a genus, instrument type unknown. These were all designed, whispers, for specific moments, but the moments never happened. He shows you one piece, a hollow reed with 6 holes but no mouthpiece. Supposed to be played by 2 people, he says. One to blow, one to finger the notes. It was a marriage test. Another is a drum filled with fine sand. It doesn't make sound when struck, only when tilted, producing a low hiss like time sliding off a plate. Calls it the hourglass percussion. The scholars have identified various obscure Roman instruments in fragmentary texts. A foot-operated clapper, a water organ, sambuca, possibly a harp, and stranger unnamed tools of sound described only in passing. But many, like those here, have no formal classification. Historians still debate whether they were toys, rituals, or desperate art projects with good PR. You're handed a small bronze horn shaped like a spiral snail. You blow gently. It lets out a tone so low it seems to sink into the stone walls and take a nap. Beams, that's the note of hesitation. You both sit for a moment, surrounded by centuries of musical failure and ambition. You realize not every sound was meant for applause. Some were meant simply to be heard once, and then stored forever. That evening you wander without, not because you want to escape him, though his vase has begun to wheeze in its sleep, but because the city has started whispering to you directly. You take turns down alleys that feel oddly familiar. Your feet find cobbles that seem to welcome them. Eventually, you stumble upon a narrow corridor with no name. It smells like crushed mint and yesterday's prayers. The walls here lean in ever so slightly, as if trying to eavesdrop on each other. You pause, the air buzzes faintly. Not with bees, not with people, but with tone. You press your palm to the wall, it's warm and vibrating. You lean in, it hums. just a single low note held like breath caught in the middle of a sentence. Then the opposite wall answers, slightly higher, like someone disagreeing politely. You've found the alley that hums. As a pair of children run past, chasing a hoop that emits a faint whistle. They don't even notice the walls singing. To them, this is just what walls do. You walk slowly, placing your hand on alternating sides. Each responds, different pitches, different moods. The one wall feels like confusion, another embarrassment, the third is undeniably smug. There are no signs, no statues, but someone has scratched a message at waist height. The stone remembers more than the Senate ever will. Once told you about resonant corners, places in Rome where acoustic frequencies bounce strangely between structures. Theaters were designed for it, of course. But alleys, accidental symphonies. A few scholars mention such spots in passing. One theory proposes they were used for secret messages passed in tone, not word. Another insists they're simply architectural quirks, stones placed just wrong enough to sing. You find a bench, just stone, no decoration, and sit. The hum continues around you, wrapping your shoulders like a shawl. And suddenly, without warning, you feel the echo of something long gone. Maybe it's a friend. Maybe it's a version of yourself you left behind in a quieter life. You stay until the twilight. By the time you stand, the alley is silent. You wonder if maybe it was singing only to you. At dawn, Rome smells of bread, clay, and ambition, the three things the city bakes daily. Finds you already awake, seated near a trickling fountain, absently tapping the lip of his old vase. You've earned a gift, he says, a market of sounds you can take home. He leads you into the lower quarters of the hill, where merchants rise before the gods and complaints are bartered before coffee. Tucked between two soap vendors and a man selling nothing but ropes, there's a strip of stalls known only to the eccentric and the heartbreakingly hopeful, the Crier's Market. Here, everything sold is made to call out. Clay birds hang from strings and chirp when the wind brushes past. Some are hollow with whistle-tuned beaks. Others rattle, coo, or trill when jostled. One vendor offers you a tiny pigeon with obsidian eyes and a pitch so sharp it could end an argument. These were once placed outside windows, she says, so loved ones could find their way home. A man at the next stall shows you miniature amphorae sealed with wax. Inside, he claims, are preserved sounds, laughter, lullabies, one dramatic sneeze. Break the seal and hear it once, he warns. Then it's gone, you only get the memory after that. You ask if they work. He shrugs sometimes. Historical references to sound-based tokens are scarce, but there are faint whispers, mentions in letters of calling jars, of small clay doves gifted to children that sang when tossed in the air. One surviving bird-shaped whistle dated to the 1st century BCE produces a warble startlingly lifelike. Whether ceremonial or playful, no scholar agrees. Some even argue they were mere toys. But then again, who says toys can't carry memory? and trades one of his quieter vases for a pair of nightingale flutes and a melancholy rooster, whose cry sounds like longing filtered through breakfast. He hands you a bird, its wings molded mid-beat. You lift it, blow gently, and it chirps once bright, clear, sincere. For a moment you feel known. The children run past, each with a clay bird on a string. The air fills with a patchwork of tiny calls, some joyful, some haunting. You wonder how many of these little songs have gotten lost in Rome's chaos, or floated upward, joining the pantheon of unacknowledged miracles. Well, that evening hesitates. It's rare to see him uncertain. He looks at you, eyes glinting not with mischief but meaning. There's one last place I've never shown anyone, he says, clutching his most recent vase like a sleeping cat, because it might listen to things we didn't mean to say. You follow him to a crumbling atrium hidden behind ivy-draped columns. The entrance is narrow and forgettable. Inside, it's dim, cool, quiet, but not empty. So the room doesn't echo. It absorbs. For the moment you speak or breathe too loudly, the sound doesn't bounce. It just vanishes. Calls it the room that listens back. He places the vase at the center of the stone floor. It doesn't hum, it just sits, still like it's waiting. He explains this room was built by a senator's son, an acoustician, a silent rebel. He believed truth was carried in tone, not word, so he built a room that wouldn't let sound escape so it could listen deeply. He hands you a reed pipe. Play something, anything. You do a small melody, unsure, simple. The notes float out and dissolve. No echo, no return, just the room receiving. Then faintly, the wall behind you exhales the final note back. Slower, warmer, like it digested what you gave it and decided to respond gently. Nods, it doesn't just reflect, it translates. You try again, this time a sentence. I miss someone. The room is still. Then behind you, you hear something between a sigh and a harmony. The room heard you, it didn't judge, it just held it. Historians mention odd structures discovered in old villas. Rooms with strange wall curvature, ceilings that bow in on themselves, floored designs meant to pull sound downward. Most were assumed to be failed architecture or bathhouse experiments. But a few believe these were early explorations of empathic space, rooms built not for people, but for their sounds to be kept safe. Finally speaks, soft as lint. I brought my father here, he said nothing. The room answered anyway. You walk to the center and close your eyes. You whisper, I didn't expect Rome to feel like this. Pause. Then a murmur returns, not your words, but your feeling, reflected, rounded, softened. You could stay here for hours, not for conversation, just for the comfort of being received. Before you leave, places the vase in a niche carved into the wall. Let it rest, he says. And outside, the moon has climbed higher than expected, casting Rome in silver and soft secrets. You and walk in silence. Not because there's nothing left to say, but because finally something else is listening. Today, Rome is loud again. Too loud. The kind of loud that rattles olives off carts and makes philosophers yell at pigeons who couldn't care less about Cicero. He winces at the noise and says, "We need a softer echo," which, of course, means you're going underground again. You arrive at the faded remains of one of the less famous Roman theaters. Most visitors see only the curved stones of the stage and the ghost of applause long faded, but shows you a narrow stair behind the performers' quarters, a passage once used for props, disguises, or perhaps late exits from poorly received tragedies. It leads to the subsonic room, as calls it, a vaulted space beneath the stage, lined with amphorae built directly into the walls. These are not storage jars, he says, they're tonal chambers. And indeed, as you walk slowly through the chamber, your footsteps stretch out, longer, softer, as if the floor is listening. The space doesn't echo, it breathes. When you speak, your voice hangs in the air a second longer than it should, then slips away. It's as if the room gently kisses every sound before letting it go. The Romans called this a method of placing bronze or clay vessels within the walls of theaters to enhance acoustics. Vitruvius, the Roman architect, described it in his writings. These vessels are to be arranged with mathematical precision to capture and carry the voice. He walks to a jar and hums. The vessel hums back, not a mirror of his tone, but an older version, worn and wiser. These were tuned, he says, each vessel set to a different note, so that every tragedy, every farce, every final line could find its echo. He leads you to a large jar cracked at the rim. This one's for sorrow, he says. It only answers when something is lost. You hum just a bit from somewhere in your chest. The vessel answers with a low sound, more a vibration than a note. You place your hand on it, warm, tired, as though it's held thousands of final words and is now gently cradling yours too. It's hard not to be moved. Whispers, theaters remember what we forget. Even laughter has an. And as you leave the chamber, a soft note lingers behind you, like a bow after the curtain falls. It doesn't speak for a long time. Hours, maybe. He simply walks beside you, tapping the rim of a silent vase tucked under one arm as if coaxing it to speak again. Eventually, you arrive at a small square off the beaten path, a space no larger than a courtyard, flanked by 3 shuttered houses and one sun-drunk cat who rules all of them. And at the center stands a fountain, modest, round, built from worn stone, rimmed with carved letters so faded they seem to erase themselves the longer you look. He calls it the fountain that remembers names. He dips a finger in the water, speaks softly, and then nods to you. Now you try. You lean in. The water smells clean, mineral-rich, like mountain wind bottled underground. You whisper your names. Nothing happens. You whisper it again, this time with less certainty. The water ripples. A light chime sounds not from metal but from within the basin, not a bell, a syllable, your names but not your voice, a little rounder, a little older. The smiles, it keeps them, not all names, just the ones spoken in softness. Legend says the fountain was built by a woman who lost her husband in a storm. She called his name into the well every day until one evening it answered. No one believed her, so she carved other names into the stone. Soon people came with their own lost names, friends, mothers, lovers, even pets. The fountain listened, and sometimes it spoke. Some archaeologists dismiss it as a coincidental acoustic anomaly, a cavity beneath the stone interacting with falling water. Others have tested the frequency of the chime and found nothing consistent. Has his own theory. It doesn't echo sound, it echoes intention. You whisper another name, someone from long ago. The water stills. Then faintly it gurgles, not a sound but a feeling, recognition. Around the rim are faded carvings, for the names too tired to be called again. You dip your hand in the water. It's warm in the way old memories are. And for the first time in your entire wandering through this city of echo and invention, you realize something very quiet but very certain. Rome doesn't just remember what was built. It remembers what was whispered, what was lost, and what still hums softly beneath the noise. His evening lays over Rome like a velvet cloth, wrinkled, soft, stitched with gold where lamplight threads through windows. Is quieter than usual, humming only once as you walk. He seems to know tonight is different. You're headed to a street that doesn't appear on maps, nor in city ledgers, nor even in the whispered lore of gossip. But it exists. Of course it does. It's called the street where shadows sing. You don't enter it, you arrive there. One moment you're passing between two olive carts arguing over price, and the next you've turned a corner and the world is muffled. Even the night sounds, chatter, hooves, distant fountains, all seem to drift away. Here in this strange street, the buildings lean close as if sharing secrets. The stones beneath your feet are darker than those elsewhere in Rome, not from wear but from memory. Because this is where the shadows keep their voices. You walk slowly, gently stepping through each patch of lamplight. The Romans built this street narrow on purpose, he says, so sound would have nowhere to go but up. You begin to hear it. Not voices exactly, but tones. Echoes that aren't yours. Steps that don't follow you but stay a few paces behind. A laugh that sounds like someone remembering joy, not experiencing it. Pauses at a shuttered door. This is where the actor lived. He was famous for speaking so softly that people lined in and never forgot his words. He points upward to a darkened window. He died mid-sentence. They say the end of his last monologue is still walking this street. You keep walking. A breeze stirs the torch flames and the shadows move. As they lengthen and shift, they sing, not with mouths but with presence. A low harmony, rising and falling like a lullaby filtered through stone. The shadows of carts sing slower than those of people. Animal shadows, especially cats, hum in shorter bursts. Your own shadow doesn't sing at all until you pause beside a crumbling column and hear a single shaky note. Now yours. It trembles, unsure but real. Looks at you and says softly, "Sometimes it takes a long time to hear yourself." Historical references to this street are non-existent in the formal record, but a handful of poets centuries apart wrote nearly identical lines. There is a path in the city where silence has a choir. Scholars argue it's metaphor, or plagiarism, or prophecy. You reach the end of the street, doesn't turn back. He simply bows deeply as if honoring not you but everything you didn't say aloud. Though the shadows behind you still sing, you don't rush, you let them finish. Though the next morning is soft around the edges, like a peach past its prime but still sweet. Rome seems to stretch slowly, rising not with urgency but with ceremony. Leads you uphill just beyond the Palatine to what looks like a neglected garden, overgrown, and weeds bloom defiantly. A statue of a minor nymph lies on her side in the grass, half smiling, half exhausted. As at its center, partially buried beneath vines and dust, lies a wide mosaic, the kind meant to impress, not to endure. It is called the mosaic of missed conversations. Each tile bears a face, not full portraits, just fragments. A cheek turned away, lips parted mid-word, an eyebrow raised in interruption. Thousands of them pieced together in a slow swirl. It's a listening mosaic, explains. Each fragment holds a moment where a conversation stopped too early. He kneels beside it and brushes dust from a pair of eyes that never got to look back. Arguments that ended in silence. Greetings left unanswered. Proposals interrupted by war or rain or pride. You walk across it slowly. The tiles don't make sound, but the silence between them is heavy, like walking across a dinner table after the guests have left mid-toast. Though there's a small bench nearby, you sit. The breeze carries nothing but the rustle of leaves and what might be a question that never found its listener. There sits beside you his vase, shaped like a spiral and painted with the phrase "speak twice" resting in his lap. Sometimes, he says, the city doesn't echo because it agrees. It echoes because it's still thinking. Now you ask how old the mosaic is. No one knows, he replies. It was uncovered accidentally. Some think it was meant to be a floor for a philosopher's home. Others say it was an art piece for the lonely. Archaeologists argue it's a failed commission, too odd, too fragmented to be complete. But the artistry is undeniable. The faces are real, human, not gods, not heroes. Just people who tried and stopped and maybe wished they hadn't. You lean forward and touch one tile, a cracked, faded mouth that seems on the verge of saying something important. But it doesn't. And maybe that's the point. It doesn't speak, you don't either. Not out of discomfort, but out of reverence. Rome is loud, yes. but it's also a city full of unspoken things, fragments, hesitations, almosts. And here, on this mosaic, they've all come together to be remembered. Not for what they were, but for what they nearly became. Wakes you before sunrise. No birds yet, no carts. No shouting over cucumbers, just the hush of dew and the creak of a city adjusting its ancient spine. We're visiting the liars, he says, you blink. He adds, or rather, the echoes they left behind. You walk together through the quiet of pre-dawn Rome, past doors still heavy with sleep, until you reach an unmarked building behind the old Curia, the former Senate House where debates once roared like weather. The place is low and square, carved into the side of a forgotten storage hall. Its entrance bears no name, just a faint symbol, a stylized ear wrapped in a ribbon. This is the archive of echoed lies, whispers. It stores the sounds people hoped would disappear. Inside, the space is cold, not because of air, but because of intention. The room is lined with ceramic shelves holding sealed flasks, each tagged with a single phrase scratched in wax. No names, no dates, just words. I never loved her. Now this will only take a day. Or you can trust me. They won't attack at night. You read them aloud softly, no response, but the air shifts as if embarrassed. These were lies told aloud, explains. And the Romans, believing sound was sacred, made a habit, at least in this circle, of containing them. He gestures toward a large jar with thick clay seams. Some say you can hear the lie if you uncork it. Others say the lie changes when heard again. One scroll in the corpus mentions a group of scholars in the late Republic who tried to collect falsehoods, not to punish, but to understand them. They believed each lie left behind a tone slightly different from truth. The idea never took off. Most people prefer comfortable deceits to acoustic experiments. You pick up a flask labeled "It's not poison." Takes it quickly from your hands. Let's not tempt irony. At the far end of the room is a clay tablet with a phrase carved in perfect script. Even a lie has a sound. It's the silence after that reveals it. He points to a narrow slit in the wall, barely noticeable. They say you can whisper a lie into that crevice. The room will keep it, but only until you return with truths. You try just one small lie, ancient and irrelevant. It disappears into the wall like smoke through a keyhole. Nothing happens, no flash, no curse, just space. And a strange feeling, not lighter but heard. You and leave quietly. The city is beginning to stir. Behind you, the archive listens. Not for justice, not for forgiveness, just for the honesty that always seems to follow. Eventually. As after the archive doesn't speak much, not out of exhaustion but reverence. The kind of silence people carry home after funerals or great concerts. He takes you to a walled courtyard hidden behind an abandoned bakery. now just stone, vines, and the ghosts of stale bread. The gate opens with a creak, as if hesitant to disturb what's inside. And what's inside is quiet, but not dead. Now this is the garden where instruments go to sleep. Scattered among the grass and fig trees are the shapes of once-played things, harps bowed with moss, flutes curled under leaves, stringed zithers propped gently against stone. None are buried, they're simply placed, gently retired. Steps lightly between them, these are not broken, just finished. You kneel beside a wooden, its reeds browned by time but still intact. You blow once softly. Nothing. Then barely a tone, one thin note like a goodbye whispered from a distance. He leads you past rows of forgotten shapes. Curved horns with ivy creeping through their bell mouths, hand drums with skins that now host small flowers. There's no music here anymore, he says. Only memory. A sub-bronze bell hangs from a tree limb. When the wind shifts, it gives a low, hesitant chime, like it's remembering something it once loved too loudly. Now there's a bench in the center of the garden, carved with the phrase, "Oh, even instruments must rest." Points to a lyre half buried in dirt. That one belonged to a widow. She played it every day until the day after her husband's funeral. Then she brought it here, said it had done its duty. There's no mention of this garden in any Roman records, but oral tradition speaks of musicians leaving their instruments in groves, believing sound was a soul, and tools that carried it needed rest. A few inscriptions in the Sibylline fragments suggest music gardens existed outside temple grounds, where no new melodies were allowed, only echoes. You find a worn flute tucked between two stones. You lift it and blow gently. Nothing, just silence, but not empty silence, full silence. The kind that listens back. Todd touches your shoulder. Leave it, he says. Let it dream. As you exit, you glance back once. A breeze moves through the garden. The bell chimes again, not loud, but enough. And in that one sound, every note that's ever mattered rises and settles. Not in triumphs, just in pieces. By now, you're starting to understand that in Rome, certain places don't just exist, they remember. They record. They rephrase your own life until you see it differently. It brings you to a building that looks like any other forgotten storehouse near the edge of the forum, except for the door, which is always slightly ajar and never swings farther open. It only wants you to slip in sideways, says, holding the door for you with the same gravity someone might use to open a confessional. Inside is a circular chamber, walls curved like the inside of a seashell. There are no decorations, no seats, no windows. Just cool stone and the faint smell of burnt oil and lemon balm. Well, welcome to the room that repeats regret. As at first you hear nothing, then you say something, anything. Hello, maybe, or is anyone here? A beat, then from behind you a voice, your voice, repeats the phrase, but slower, as if weighed down by memory. So steps in and speaks, I should have left earlier. As a pause, the walls reply, I should have left earlier. But the tone has changed. It's not mocking, not accusatory, it's just sad. This room was built to teach senators reflection, he tells you. Speak too rashly in here, and you'll hear what it sounds like when your words live too long. You walk slowly around the curve, speaking simple phrases. They return to you warped gently, not distorted but burdened, like they've carried your intention too far. I didn't mean to hurt you, you whisper. Though the room gives it back. I meant to hurt you. And somehow hearing it makes it truer, or maybe just more final. One inscription remains, carved into the wall above the exit. A voice spoken once is a moment. A voice returned is a mirror. Some scholars believe this was a philosophical chamber, an experiment in acoustics. Others think it was therapeutic, a place where military commanders, poets, and public speakers rehearsed not their lines, but their conscience. It's impossible to know. The building was sealed for centuries before being accidentally reopened during plumbing repairs. The laborers swore they heard arguments through the walls, though no one was inside. You ask the room one last question, was I wrong? Though the echo doesn't return immediately, and when it does, it simply says, "Oh, was I?" And you realize this place doesn't judge, it only reflects. The regret is yours to name. The day is almost done and Rome stretches in golden fatigue. Cats curl in clay pots. Coins are counted without joy. The smell of roasted garlic, olive pits, and dust heavy with memory hangs like a perfume the city refuses to wash off. The steps are slower now, not out of weariness but reverence. There's one last sound, he says, not a melody, just one note played forever. He leads you beyond the hill, into the oldest part of Rome's ribs, where stone seems older than language and alleys remember when wolves were more common than men. Here stands a round temple, long unused and partially collapsed. Inside, half hidden beneath collapsed columns and ivy-draped statues, is an opening, a door, or a passage, or simply a wound in the wall. This is the chamber of one note, whispers. It's inside, the chamber is shaped like a dome, but not a perfect one. A single clay pipe runs from its center into the wall, connected to a hidden cavity. No one knows where it leads. No one ever found the other side. While you don't see an instrument, there's no performer, and yet you hear it. A single note, low, warm, constant. It doesn't vibrate or echo, it exists. Like a breath that never stops. Khan closes his eyes. Some say it was built to resonate with the earth. Others say it's the final note of a hymn that was never finished. He adds more softly, I think it's the sound Rome makes when she forgives you. You sit on a smooth stone, the note continues. It doesn't ask for attention, it doesn't change, and yet it isn't flat, somehow it feels. Not musical exactly, but deeply humans. You notice tears in your eyes, not from sadness, just from the weight of hearing something that feels older than grief and gentler than memory. Historians dispute the chamber's origin. Some claim it was a failed experiment in aqueduct pressure. Others believe it was part of a lost religious rite where one note was played to align the body with the gods. A fringe theory says it's a natural frequency of the land itself, and the chamber simply reveals it. So it says nothing more, neither do you. You both sit there listening, not for change, not for answers, just listening. While the sun outside lowers, the note remains. And for the first time, you understand. Not every story needs an ending. Some just need a place to rest. There are places in Rome that seem to have been forgotten even by time itself. Staircases that vanish behind wine cellars. Alleys that aren't listed on any scroll. Rooftops that were once floors for something far older below. Guides you to one of those places. You've stopped asking where you're going. He knows. The city knows. And at this point, you're just the echo they both decided to keep. You arrive at what appears to be a collapsed granary. Ivy claws at its brickwork like a cat with commitment issues. In the back, behind stacked amphorae and a sun-bleached mosaic of Neptune who looks slightly hungover, there's a spiral staircase, half buried and steep enough to suggest a destination no one visits by accident. All this is the Vase. On the staircase that remembers voices. Each step you take downwards gives a faint sound, not your footfall but a voice. Not words but fragments, breaths, laughter, hushed names. It doesn't feel haunted, it feels populated by pieces. Romans believed staircases could trap echoes, he explains. So they built them narrow, steep, and sacred. He pauses on one step and says softly, "This one remembers my mother." The step beneath him hums faintly, a woman's exhale drawn from a memory no one told. He doesn't smile, but his shoulders lower, like something in him has been set down after too many years. You descend slowly, each step offers something. A whispered apology. A toast half completed. A child's voice yelling wait. A laugh cut short. Leans against the wall and runs his fingers along the stones. The stones here aren't mortared. They're bound with beeswax and lye, meant to conduct sound, not support weight. No record of the staircase appears in any archive, but modern acoustic engineers who tested similar architecture in ancient Roman bathhouses have noticed peculiar sonic preservation, particularly in stairwells and long, narrow corridors. Now this one seems different though, deliberate. At the bottom of the stairs is a small landing. A flat stone slab rests at its center, ringed with olive oil stains and faint boot marks. He places his hand on the stone. "Speak now," he says, "and if the city finds your words worthy, they'll live here too." You hesitate, then whisper something not meant for the world, just for time. The stone remains still. But when you step back, you hear it soft, unsure, but there. Your voice, folded into the stairs. Not loud. Just waiting. The sun is low again, bleeding into everything. Rome turns gold at this hour, not because she's trying to impress, but because she's too proud to dim quietly. This leads you through a path of nettle and wild rosemary, until you reach an old granary-turned shrine at the edge of a dry riverbed. A mill wheel, long motionless, leans against the wall. But you hear something, not grinding, not turning, just pulling. Now this, says, is the mill that grinds silence. You stare, the building's roof has long since collapsed, but inside stands a wide, circular stone basin where the mill once turned. Now it turns no more, but it listens. Well, when someone has heard too much, he says, they come here, they speak. They offer their silence, and the mill accepts it. He points to a rope hanging near the basin, threaded through a cracked pulley. Pull it if you're ready to be quiet. While you step inside. The stone is cool underfoot. Dust drifts in like old paper. You place your hand on the rope and feel not tension but waiting. You pull. The rope groans. The basin stirs just once, like a wheel remembering movement. Well, then the air changes. The wind outside stops. Birds hold their notes. Even your breath feels like an intrusion. While you speak. Not loud, just enough for the mill to hear. A confession, perhaps, or a moment that's weighed too much for too long. Oh, and then a sound. A low grind, not harsh, not sharp, but slow, like stone smoothing stone. Places a small offering, an empty flute on the basin's rim. Oh, it's not about forgetting, he says. It's about sanding down the edges. You sit beside the basin for a while, saying nothing else. And the silence it returns to you is different, not empty, refined. Scholars once speculated about temples in rural Rome where sound rituals were practiced, not to celebrate speech but to release it. They mention granaries of stillness, which some interpret as symbolic, but insists the mill doesn't care what you say, only that you leave a little less noisy than you arrived. You press your palm to the basin's side. It's warm now. Though the silence you offered is gone. But in its place pieces. A polished space where something jagged used to live. That night, Rome is impossibly quiet, as if the city itself has inhaled and simply forgotten to let go. Even seems unusually still, walking beside you without commentary, his ever-present vase cradled under one arm like a sleeping infant. He stops beside a garden wall tangled with jasmine and faded vines, then taps lightly 3 times. A door opens inward soundlessly. A woman older than dust, brighter than moonlight nods. She doesn't ask your name, she just gestures you inside. Though this is the House of Lanterns. Not a temple, not a shop, just a place. The kind that knows why you came before you do. Inside, the walls are lined with lanterns. Hundreds, all made of clay or thin metal painted in soft blues and sleeping gold. Some glow, some flicker. Others hang dormant like breaths that haven't decided whether to stay or leave. Now you ask what they are. Answers gently, dreams spoken aloud once then kept. He leads you past a row labeled names never given. Another reads journeys not taken. A third, answers thought too late. The lanterns here glow in subtle pulses, as though sighing. You're given a small, unfinished lantern of your own. The old woman hands you a brush made of olive twigs and horsehair. No ink, just the brush. You don't paint what the dream was, she says. You paint what it left behind. Your hands move slowly, not drawing, tracing a memory familiar and nameless, a warmth, a room, a sound that maybe wasn't real. When you finish, the lantern glows faint but steady. You hang it beside others. For a moment it flickers in rhythm with the ones nearby, then settles into its own slow beat. Some historians speak of votive lamps in ancient homes, lit not for the gods, but for thoughts people didn't want to forget before sleep. One mosaic shows a woman whispering into a lantern before blowing it out. Scholars argue whether it was metaphor or ritual. No conclusion ever stuck. It leads you into a side chamber. There a single lantern swings slowly on a chain. It doesn't glow, but it hums. A long, low tone, peaceful, heavy. Now this one, he whispers, is for unspoken forgiveness. Now you sit beneath it and close your eyes. It doesn't speak back. It doesn't need to. Now you already feel forgiven, even if you don't know for what. Now the next morning you wake before the city. The sky is soft and uncommitted. The shadows still yawn against the walls. Meets you with a look that feels like a farewell, but stretched over something longer. One more place, he says, we don't go up often, but Rome has heights too. You walk together through sleeping alleys and under arches no one appreciates until they collapse. Eventually, you reach a small hill outside the center, crowned by a slender tower taller than it needs to be, made of stone so weathered it looks like memory itself carved it. Now this is the Tower of Almosts. Inside, the stairs spiral with soft unevenness. Each step tilts slightly toward indecision. The climb is not difficult, just thoughtful. Along the walls, inscriptions. He nearly kissed her. She almost turned back. They were about to forgive each other. Each one carved in different hands, different centuries. No one claims them. They simply hang there like unfinished chapters, somehow more powerful than any ending. It explains this tower records moments not taken, choices so close to becoming real that they echo louder than facts. As you climb, you hear soft tones, wind moving through tiny holes in the wall, each tuned to a note. One for hesitation, one for fear, one for longing so sharp it rings. At the top, the tower opens into a viewing platform. Rome spreads out beneath you, messy, golden, cracked with time and laced with poetry. It doesn't shimmer, it settles. The leans on the railing, wind pressing his robe gently against his knees. They say if you speak you're almost allowed here, he says. The wind will carry it to the version of you that did it. You stand there unsure. Then barely above a whisper you name something, a choice you didn't make, a person you didn't call, a word you didn't say when it would mattered. Though the wind hears, it doesn't answer, but it accepts. Some modern scholars believe this tower once served as a beacon or a military lookout, but graffiti inside the stones suggests otherwise. I was going to love you, one reads. I walked up and still didn't know what to say, reads another. Now you realize this tower wasn't built to see enemies. Oh, it was built to see what might have been. He places his vase gently on the ledge. The wind passes through its spout. It hums a long, unfinished note. Though the sound is not sad. Just suspended. Like everything you never quite lost. It's evening now again, Rome restless beneath her own weight. The sky is the color of bruised figs and the alleys glow like spilled candlelight. It doesn't take you far, just a short walk down a lane you somehow haven't noticed before, even though you've passed it every day. The door he opens isn't special. No carvings, no myth. Just a simple wood latch worn smooth by fingers long gone. Inside is a round room, empty but for one object. A clock or something shaped like one. It stands on a pedestal of marble the color of tired parchment. The face is bronze, burnished by time. The outer rim bears the usual divisions, 12 marks, but there are no hands, just empty space. Oh, and yet somehow it ticks. Now this is the horologium vacuum, says. Oh, the clock without hands. Oh, he doesn't explain at first, just gestures for you to sit. There's a single bench, not quite stone, not quite wood, something in between. Oh, you listen. I'll tick. Now, no motion, no progression, no difference from second to second. Oh, but the sound is deliberate. He finally speaks. It was built by a senator's son who believed time wasn't a line but a room, one you walk into and out of. The clock ticks not forward but inward. Now you feel it too. Not like counting, more like rememberings. Oh, each tick is a weight, a breath, a regret, a reconciliation not in sequence all at once. A tiny inscription runs along the base. You are always inside the moment you left behind. Historians have found references to unusual timekeeping mechanisms among fringe Roman inventors. Men who tried to capture hours in oil lamps, in water bowls, even in caged birds that chirped only when the sun hit them just so. But none of them made a clock like this. Because this isn't about hours. It's about weight. You lean in and whisper a date, a name, something that still bruises gently. The clock ticks, louder this time, no answer, just acknowledgement. He places his hand on the pedestal. People come here to listen to what never moved on. The room doesn't ask you to let go. It only asks you to sit with it, long enough for the tick to soften. You close your eyes and breathe in rhythm. Tick, tick, tick. You don't leave lighter, but you leave quieter. And for now, that's enough. Night now deep and silk dark. Rome's marble bones stretch beneath the stars. The city hums not loudly, not with pride, just with continuity. God carries a lantern this time. Clay, not glass. Its flame is small and blue as though lit by memory itself. He says nothing as he guides you through narrow lanes, past shuttered workshops, sleeping goats, a single tavern that refuses to sleep, and finally through an iron gate curled like a question. Now this is the speculum, the mirror that reflects in sound. The chamber is circular, walls smooth, curved inward. No angles, no shadow. A single basin of water sits at the center. Above it hangs a disc, not a mirror exactly, but a round sheet of polished bronze. No reflection shows, just shimmer. Light slides off it like it knows it's not welcome here. Speak, says, but not to be heard, speak to be echoed. You kneel before the basin, you say your name. There's no sound, no image. Then the water ripples, and from the walls comes not your words but their tone. Rounded, deepened, played back not as you spoke them but as you felt them. It's not mimicry, it's music. I steps forward and says simply, home. The word returns drawn out, cloaked in warmth. It sounds like bread, like doorways, like people waiting. He says another word, leave. It comes back sharp, quick, not angry, just permanent. He turns to you. The mirror doesn't reflect what you look like. It reflects what your voice holds. Historians often wrote about polished metals used for reflection, bronze mirrors, obsidian, water bowls, but few mention sound. Except one passage by Pliny, who describes a sacred dish used by the Vestals to determine truth, not by what was said, but how it returned when spoken in devotion. Though the mirror is still, the water waits. You try a phrase, something tender, something from far away in your past. The bronze disc hums softly, as if catching it, turning it over and offering it back. Not to analyze, just to remind you of its shape. You realize your voice is not just a thing that lives you. It's a thing that can return, changed, understood. He points to an inscription beneath the basin. We leave parts of ourselves in every sentence. The mirror sends them home. You rise slowly, the mirror dims, the water stills, the room falls quiet. But you hear it again yourself behind you. Not your voice, your truths. And this time, it's not so hard to face it. You wake late, or perhaps you never really slept. The air feels different. The kind of different you don't notice with your body, but somewhere under your ribs, where memory waits for permission. Stands by the window, staring toward something that isn't visible but clearly present. It's time, he says, for the last sound. You walk together slowly now, the pace of people who know they're at the end of something and trying not to make it hurry. Rome seems to part for you, streets feel softer, footfalls lighter, even the pigeons give you space. You reach a building shaped like forgetting. It's not grand. In fact, it's barely there, half-sunk, half-shaded vines braiding themselves through its columns like aging fingers. The door is a slab of polished basalt, carved only with one line. As if you remember it, it's not here. This is the library of sounds that no longer exist. Tom touches the door and it opens not with a creak but a sigh. Inside, silence, but not empty silence, thick, layered. A silence that has listened to so much it has become too full to speak. Shelves line the walls, but not with scrolls or books. Instead, there are vessels, ceramic, bronze, stone, each shaped differently with small tokens inside, feather fragments, smoothed bones, pieces of flutes, seashells, tiny ropes. You walk past plaques that read, "The sound of a god no longer." The rustle of a soldier's goodbye in 18 BC. The creak of the first wooden door in this city. The voice of a language now no one's throat remembers. These are the sounds, says quietly, that no one living can recall. So we keep their memory in shape, in weight, in temperature. He opens a small box. Inside, a copper bowl with a crack too perfect to be accidental. He taps it. The room responds with a hum that feels like grief stretched thin over history. No one knows who made this library. Some say it was a Vestal virgin who heard too much. Others claim it was built by a man who had once gone deaf, then regained his hearing in old age, and missed the lost sounds more than the restored ones. You pause before one sealed jar. No label, no markings. Nods, that one holds the first sound you ever forgot. You don't open it. You don't need to. The sounds already begun to return to you, not clearly, not sharply, but as warmth, as pressure behind your eyes, as the sensation of being very small and held. You sit beside it. The silence around you deepens, not with absence, but with reverence. And as you breathe, you understand. Some sounds don't disappear. They retreat. And wait. You're still now. The journey is done, but it lingers. Like the last note of a song played far too softly for anyone else to hear, but loud enough for your soul to remember. You close your eyes. Beneath your feet Rome hums, not with engines or chaos, but with centuries of footsteps layered like dust on marble. You feel them all. The potter's heel, the widow's sandals, the child running without purpose, the philosopher who never finished his sentence. Above you, the sky fades slowly. Not dark, not light, but that patient in-between where things go to become part of the next story. A sub-breeze drifts through the broken window, carrying nothing and everything. You remember the vase that sang back. The alleys that hummed. The mill that sanded sorrow into something smooth. The tower that heard your almost. The clock that never moved forward. The mirror that let you hear yourself again. You don't need to speak anymore. The city has already recorded you. Your voice is somewhere now. maybe in a stair, maybe in a stone, maybe in a jar beside others, glowing faintly with memory. You are not lost. You are echoed. The room darkens gently. You breathe once more, slower now. Slower still. You are inside the sound that comes after everything. And it is not silence. It is rest. Good night.